I was the only one at Mill's deathbed. Her kids abandoned her, never appearing to say their last farewell. When she finally passed, the nurse pressed a sealed letter and a cold brass key into my hand. Only after her last whisper echoed, names, instructions, and my phone started buzzing. I was just a beer truck guy, holding my mother-in-law's hand as she lay dying, her own kids nowhere to be found. But the secret she whispered in her final breaths wasn't about love or goodbyes. It was a devastating truth about family betrayal that would turn my entire life upside down. It was St. Luke's, room 221 in New Britain. The heart monitor beeped with this steady, almost insistent rhythm, like it was trying too hard to be comforting. Then it skipped, dragged, and I felt my stomach drop because I knew exactly what was coming. I just couldn't bring myself to admit it. I was 36 back then, pushing cases of beer for mid-state beverage out of Hartford. Just a beer truck guy, my wife Avery always reminded me. And there I was, the only one in that sterile, antiseptic-smelling room, watching my mother-in-law, Lucille Hartman, fade away. That sweet metallic decay you never forget once it hits you. The one that screams, "Last stop?" Yeah, that smell was everywhere. A muted baseball game flickered on the wall-mounted TV, players moving like ghosts, no sound. I kept my eyes glued to it because watching the clock felt like a countdown to something I couldn't bear. Nurse Carla Ruiz kept checking in, a kind face in a sea of sterile efficiency. Every hour, she'd poke her head in, asking if I needed coffee. I just kept saying I was fine, even though I clearly wasn't. She knew what I was really doing, waiting. Not for Lucille to pass, but for her own kids to finally show up. They never did. I'd called Avery, my wife, 9 times that day, that night. Left voicemails, texts, the whole 9 yards. Tyler, her brother, got 5 calls from me. Both of them answered once, barely. Said they were in meetings and would head over soon. And then? Nothing, just those infuriating, sterile thumbs-up emojis. Like we were confirming brunch plans, not watching their mother die. I swear, if I'd gotten one more cartoon hand from either of them, I would have thrown my phone right through the nurse's station window. Lucille hadn't spoken in over a day. Just shallow, fluttery breaths. I was just rambling, telling her some stupid story about her neighbor's dog finally quitting its barking obsession with the mailman, when her hand shot out. It grabbed my wrist with a strength I hadn't felt from her in months, like she was 50 years younger. "They think I don't know," she whispered, her voice thin but shockingly sharp. My heart hammered against my ribs. I leaned in close. "What do you mean, Lucille?" She shook her head, her eyes suddenly clearer than they'd been in days, locking onto mine. "Don't press the call button." A chilling pause. "Avery and Tyler aren't coming. They weren't coming yesterday either." Her hand tightened, a vice around my wrist. "There's a key for you?" "Storage Route 5, Unit 193. Martin, Feld, only after." "Only after what?" I asked, my voice barely a croak. She didn't answer at first, just stared at me, her gaze almost memorizing. Then she said, "Promise me." I nodded, numb. "Yeah, okay. I promise." What else do you say when a dying woman asks for something? You don't argue. You don't ask for clarification. You just say yes and pray you'll figure it out later. Nurse Carla walked in just as that steady beep stretched into the long, unbroken flat line. That sound. The sound that never ends. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. I just watched, frozen, as Lucille's hand slowly, gently slipped out of mine. Like she was the one letting go of me. Carla, bless her, didn't offer any empty "I'm sorries" or soft platitudes. She just quietly turned off the machines, walked over, and handed me a sealed envelope. My name was on it in Lucille's sharp, careful handwriting. "She was lucky to have you," Carla said, her voice gentle but firm. I couldn't speak. Anything I tried to say would have come out wrong. Too angry, too raw. I shoved that envelope deep into my jacket pocket and walked out, fast, like I had somewhere incredibly important to be. I sat in the hospital parking garage for 10 long minutes, the car running, my hands gripped tight on the wheel but not going anywhere. Lucille was gone. And I, the beer truck guy, the son-in-law by marriage, was the only one who had shown up. The only one holding her hand. I just kept staring at the elevator entrance, a morbid curiosity creeping in. Would Avery even ask how her mom died? Or would her first question be about whether I remembered her dry cleaning for some client dinner? When I finally got home, I dropped my keys in the dish and just slumped at the kitchen table. No lights on, just that dim under-cabinet glow Avery liked for mood. Lucille's envelope felt stiff in my hand, its edges sharp like it didn't belong in our house. The brass key clinked out first, clean, cold, and heavier than I expected. A little tag was attached. Lockbox RT5US 193, in Lucille's neat block letters. The letter itself was short, no fluff. Straight to the point, just like her. She didn't bother with sentimental build-up. She wrote that she'd seen who her kids were, not in a moment, but over time. They chose themselves, she'd written, and left me to manage my own decline. I read that line 3 times, feeling it sink in like a punch to the gut. Then came the real shocker. I kept records, facts, shut mouths. That was Lucille, all right, but colder, sharper than I'd ever heard her, even on her worst days. She told me to trust Martin Feld, and then, inexplicably, to trust myself more. That last part didn't sit right. It felt like she was talking to someone else. Me? I wasn't the guy people trusted with final wishes and secret storage units. I was the guy who hauled pallets of IPAs and got made fun of at family dinners for not wearing a tie. I put the letter down and just stared at our fridge, that glossy white paneling Avery had picked out because it photographed clean. Around midnight, I heard her heels clicking. Sharp and staccato up the walkway through the front door. She breezed in, still in her work clothes, looking like she'd stepped right out of an ad for her own design firm. She kissed my cheek, a quick, almost automatic gesture like it was just protocol. Then she dropped her purse onto the counter with a thud, like she lived somewhere else entirely. "How's Mom?" she asked, not even sitting down, already reaching for a La Croix from the fridge. "She passed at 1800 hours," I said. No build-up. No soft landing. Just the stark, brutal truth. Avery froze, the fridge door still open, cold air humming against her legs. "God, the timing," she muttered. The timing. As if Lucille had been inconsiderate for dying midweek. I waited. For a tear, a sigh, a second question, anything. Instead, she turned to me. "We have Mercer Lang coming for a design pitch Friday, so I need you to handle the hospital paperwork. Just get whatever they need. I can't cancel this one." Then, without missing a beat, she launched into a detailed description of some backsplash tile she'd found in Soho. It was like we hadn't just lost the one person in her life who still called her baby and actually meant it. I kept my mouth shut. The envelope and the key stayed tucked deep in my jacket pocket. She didn't ask about her mom beyond that one detached question. I didn't offer anything. She went upstairs before 1. I stayed down, rereading Lucille's letter under the soft yellow kitchen light. One line now stuck harder than all the others. They never asked who I was, only what I had. That sank in deep, a heavy stone in my gut. I'd watched Lucille spend holidays waiting for a text back, listened to her make excuses for Avery when she wouldn't show up for a chemo appointment, and through all that, Lucille didn't become bitter. She became precise, quiet, but utterly deliberate. I couldn't stop thinking about the night Lucille taught me to make her chicken cutlets. Real thin, pan-fried, never oven-baked. She'd said Avery always hated cooking, hated the smell of grease on her clothes. So Lucille showed me instead. She even slipped me $20 for gas that night, calling it a bribe for loyalty, and smiled like I was doing her a favor just by being there. I hadn't thought about that night in years, but now it was playing on a loop in my head, a painful reminder of genuine connection. Avery never came back down. I just sat in the dark, glass of water growing warmer as the ice melted, the whole room feeling colder than it had any right to be. Around 1:30, I finally pulled out my phone and texted Tyler, "She's gone." 20 minutes later, his response popped up. One word, brutal, and then a skull emoji. I stared at that stupid cartoon skull for a full minute, my blood running cold. That's what his mother's death was to him. Brutal with a cartoon skull. If I'd had that brass key in my hand right then, I swear, I would have gotten in the car and driven straight to Route 5, just to get out of that house and that toxic silence. Instead, I just sat there until the ice was long gone, the only sound the fridge compressor kicking on and off. The silence in that kitchen wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that creeps in when you start realizing the people closest to you stopped seeing you a long, long time ago. The next morning, Avery breezily asked if I could swing by the funeral home after my deliveries, like she was sending me to the dry cleaners. I bit back my response, told her I'd take care of it. And I would. But first, I drove straight to lockbox storage, that cold brass key clutched in my hand, Lucille's dying words running laps in my head. I didn't even clock out. Just told Manny. I was grabbing lunch and got in the truck, that key burning a hole in my pocket. Lucille's voice a ghostly presence sitting right on my shoulder. Lockbox storage was exactly where Lucille said, just off Route 5, tucked behind a strip mall and a Dunkin'. Easy to miss if you didn't know it was there. But I wasn't guessing, I knew. Unit 193 was down the third row, a dead end. No cameras I could see. I slid the key in and it turned smooth, almost eager. The door rattled up with a loud bang like a garage door on bad springs. And then I saw it. This wasn't storage. There was no clutter, no dusty lamps or broken vacuums. Inside was almost unnervingly clean. Too clean. A single beige metal folding chair like something from a church basement. And 2 filing cabinets side by side. Everything was labeled in Lucille's neat, tight handwriting. I read the labels once. Then again, banking, medical, Tyler, attorney, and then proof. My stomach twisted into a knot. Proof. That was the one that hit me hardest. You don't label a drawer proof unless you know someone's going to need it. I opened it first. Right on top was a spreadsheet, color-coded, detailing every single payment Lucille had made on behalf of Avery and Tyler. Hospital bills. Loan payments. Even groceries. Every single one marked promised reimbursement, and almost none of them fulfilled. I flipped through printed bank statements, damning emails, Venmo screenshots. Tyler's tone shifted from, I got you next week, to, I thought I paid that, to absolute silence. One email showed him writing, my bad, after Lucille reminded him, again, about the $22,000 she'd fronted for his dealership. Another folder was all Avery. Glossy Instagram prints, beautiful lighting, perfect table settings, captions like family first, with Lucille conspicuously absent from every single picture. Then a series of texts. Avery telling Lucille, Mom, it's just not your scene, when Lucille had asked to be included for Thanksgiving. Another one read, I'll try to swing by after the mixer. Can you warm up dinner for me? Like Lucille was hired staff, not her own mother. I opened an envelope and found a cheap voice recorder inside. I pressed play on the first file, and there it was. Avery's voice clipped and impatient. You don't have to be dramatic, she snapped. It's just a ride. Lucille's voice was soft, almost embarrassed. The chemo makes me tired, that's all. Well, then take an Uber, Avery replied, utterly devoid of warmth. I'm booked through 6, Lucille's voice dropped to a whisper. Okay, honey. She sounded like someone who had spent her entire life apologizing for needing anything at all. My gut clenched. I sank onto the folding chair, feeling it creak precariously beneath me. My head was buzzing like I'd stuck my finger in an electrical socket. This wasn't petty stuff. This was deliberate, sustained, cold-blooded. I wasn't just holding evidence. I was holding a story, a dark secret no one had wanted me to hear. Then I found the legal envelope. Last will revised. Notarized just 2 months before Lucille passed. I held my breath as I read it. Avery and Tyler each got a keepsake. Nothing big. A cameo brooch for Avery, a box of family photos for Tyler. Lucille wrote that the rest of her money, $62,000 and some change, should go to 3 local charities she supported. And then, the line that made my chest tighten, made the air catch in my throat. The remainder goes to Dorian for reasons known to me and anyone paying attention. My name. In a legal document. No fine print. No loophole. Just there, like I'd earned it. But I didn't feel proud. I felt completely knocked sideways, utterly stunned. Attached to the will was another folder. A property deed for a cottage in Old Saybrook. 12 Harbor Lane, handwritten on a sticky note. Go there first. Then Martin. A cottage? I'd never heard Lucille mention it, not once. She'd owned it for 21 years, and I hadn't even known she liked the beach. The last folder was the smallest. A stack of deposit slips for an account in my name. Opened 3 years back. Every couple of months, a few $100. Like birthday cards, holidays, over time it added up. Just shy of $8,000 now. The sticky note on the front simply read, for Dorian's backbone. I knew he had one before he did. I leaned forward, hands on my knees, staring at the concrete floor. Cool. Faint oil stain near the door. That was all that kept me grounded. This wasn't how inheritance worked. Not in the real world. Not for guys like me. Lucille wasn't paying me for being good. She documented everything because she knew they would come for it later. She wanted someone to be ready. She'd made me her clean exit plan. I carefully put the documents back in order, slid them into my delivery tote, and locked the unit, feeling like I was sealing something sacred. I sat in the cab of my truck for a minute, just breathing. Not driving. Not calling anyone. I needed to think. Then I opened my Maps app, typed in 12 Harbor Lane, Old Saybrook, and hit directions. I wasn't going home. Not yet. The GPS chirped arrived, but it didn't feel real until I actually saw the cottage. It was tucked away behind tall beach grass with a low, wobbly driftwood fence, clearly for charm, not security. Flagstones led up to a small porch where a wind chime made from spoons clinked gently, like a quiet laugh Lucille might have let slip when no one was watching. The place wasn't big. One story, gray clapboard, white trim, but it looked solid, lived in. Not a single for-show vibe anywhere. I pulled the key from my jacket. It slid into the lock and turned without a squeak, as if it had been waiting for me. The door swung open, releasing air that smelled like lemon oil and salt water. Clean, warm, real. The kind of smell you only get when someone truly cares about a space. Inside, it was like walking straight into Lucille's memory, but this one was full of color. Her paintings were everywhere, framed on the walls, leaning on shelves. Mostly boats, big sky scenes, late daylight. One, though, captivated me. A little girl in a red jacket standing on a dock with her back turned. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't recognize the girl. Maybe no one did. Maybe that was the whole point. On the kitchen table, another envelope. Thicker this time. My name again in Lucille's crisp block letters. My hands were still rough with road dust and nerves as I sat down to open it. This letter had more heart than the first. More fire, too. Lucille didn't waste time with grief or apologies. She got right to it. She said Avery would accuse me of manipulation, that Tyler would throw around threats and legal jargon like candy at a parade. "They'll say you isolated me," she wrote. "But they were gone before you ever sat down in that hospital chair." She'd even attached a letter from Dr. Ingrid Shue, a neuropsych capacity evaluator, dated just 6 weeks before she passed. It spelled it out. Full cognitive capacity, no signs of coercion or delusion, decisions made with deliberate independence. Lucille had planned every inch of this, like she knew exactly what fight was coming. Further down, she told me this cottage wasn't just hers. It was her, she wrote. Her before the treatments, before the guilt, before being someone else's job to handle. This place reminded me I existed. And then the line that truly got to me. Use it for company, not hiding. I walked through the place slowly, reverently, as if moving too fast might break something. Every room was warm, simple, full of little signs that someone had deeply loved being there. No high-end appliances, no designer tile, just cast iron pans, a sun-faded quilt, and stacks of sketchbooks near every chair. In the bedroom closet, one thing stopped me cold. A garment bag. I pulled it out, unzipped it halfway, and there it was. A navy blazer, hanging perfectly. My size, no tag. Inside the lining, pinned to the seam, was a small note. Wear this to the reading. Armor isn't only for soldiers. I sat on the bed, holding the blazer like it might speak to me. Then I stood, slipped it on, and stared at myself in the full-length mirror. It wasn't tailored, but it didn't have to be. It fit well enough to feel like a version of myself I hadn't met yet. Not the guy Avery rolled her eyes at during dinner parties. Not the afterthought. I looked like someone who didn't duck out of hard things, even if a part of me still desperately wanted to. I walked out to the porch and called Martin Feld. He answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. "This is Dorian Hartman," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Lucille said to call you." "She told me you would," he replied. "Come tomorrow at 2:30, bring the documents. And bring any courage you've got left." I didn't know whether to laugh or throw up, but I managed. "I'll be there." And hung up. The sun was dropping low when I wandered into the backyard. The lawn was mostly sand and patchy grass, but along the fence line was a half-built raised bed, rebar sticking up like arms halfway through a job. A stake stood in the center with a packet of marigold seeds rubber-banded to the top. She'd planned to plant them, or planned for me to finish it. Maybe both. Inside, a small desk was tucked against the wall near a window with peeling trim. A legal pad lay open, a pen beside it. I hadn't planned to write anything, but I found myself sitting down, staring at the empty lines. And then, in big block letters like hers, I wrote, "I will not be ashamed for showing up." I underlined it twice. Then I closed the notepad, hung the blazer by the front door, and turned out the lights. The fight was coming and Lucille had given me my armor. Martin Feld's office was on the second floor above a bait shop. A no-nonsense brick building with narrow windows looking out over the harbor, smelling of old wood polish and paper. Framed photos of schooners lined the walls. A quiet message. I've been here a long time, and I don't scare easy. Martin stood as I walked in, his hand extended, grip firm, eyes sharp but not unkind. He glanced at the navy blazer I was wearing and gave me a subtle nod, like we both understood exactly what it was. Armor. Take a seat, Dorian, he said, pointing to the chair opposite his desk. I laid Lucille's documents down in a neat stack, forcing my hands flat on my thighs to stop them from fidgeting. Martin leaned back, his eyes flicking to the door, a faint smirk playing on his lips as if he knew exactly what kind of entrance was coming. Avery blew in 10 minutes late, her heels clicking a sharp staccato on the hardwood, every movement a performance. Perfect hair, fresh makeup, a cream-colored blazer and pants that probably cost more than my entire beer truck. She didn't look at me right away, just dropped her purse, smoothed her lapel, and sat across the table, radiating an air of someone summoned for a deposition she fully intended to win. Tyler swaggered in right behind her, all puffed up, collar popped on his navy polo, a fake smile plastered on his face. He gripped Martin's hand too hard, like he was closing a deal. "Good to finally meet," he said, his voice bright, but his eyes kept darting to the folder in front of Martin, like he was checking the score before kickoff. Martin didn't waste a second on pleasantries. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Lucille Hartman," he stated, his voice even. "Before we begin, I want to confirm for the record that Dr. Shu's capacity evaluation is entered. Lucille Hartman was of sound mind, fully competent, and acted independently." He slid a folder forward and tapped it once. "Any questions before I start?" Avery crossed her arms, her chin tilting defiantly. "I'm sure we'll have some later," Tyler smirked. "Let's get on with it." Martin reached for a small speaker on the corner of his desk and rolled it forward. "You'll hear some of this from me," he said, "but most from Lucille herself." He hit play. Her voice filled the room, calm, measured, unhurried. She listed her small keepsakes first, sounding almost apologetic. "To my daughter, Avery," Lucille's recorded voice echoed, "I leave my charm bracelet and my regret." She paused. The words hung in the air, stinging like a whip. "To my son Tyler, I leave a box of photos and my hope you'll look at them." Avery's chin tilted upward, but her jaw tightened. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes narrowing, like someone had just thrown cold water on him. Martin continued, his voice cutting through the tension. "The remainder of the estate," he paused again, letting the silence build, "will be detailed shortly." Lucille's recording went on, explaining in plain words what was hers, what she'd put aside and what she was doing with it. No legal jargon. Just Lucille, making herself heard in a room where she was no longer alive to sit. Martin looked up, his gaze sweeping across Avery and Tyler. "For clarity," he stated, "the West Hartford property is, and always has been, titled in Lucille Hartman's name. There is no joint tenancy with right of survivorship. You have been living there under her ownership." Tyler shot to his feet, slamming his palm flat on the desk. "That's not true. She told me—" Martin raised a single finger, his voice dangerously calm. "Sit down, Mr. Hartman. It is true, and the deed is here." He tapped the document. Tyler slowly sank back into his chair, eyes flicking to his sister, like he'd suddenly lost his footing. Avery finally turned to me, her eyes cold, accusing. "He manipulated her," she spat, her voice sharp as broken glass. "He had access. He isolated her. I didn't move a muscle." Martin reached forward and hit play on another file. Avery's voice came through, clear and recorded. "We'll talk after my pitch," she said. Then Lucille's small, tired voice, "I'm too tired to drive, honey." And then, nothing. The silence in the room after the audio stopped felt like a dropped curtain. "Context," Tyler barked, indignant. "You're cherry-picking." Martin didn't flinch. He opened a binder and slid out bank logs. "Context?" His voice was still cool, deadly. "Here's context." He laid down the printouts. "A transfer of $22,500 to your dealership. Labeled vendor float. A sticky note from Lucille. Repay in 6 months. 15 months later. An email from you, Mr. Hartman. My bad. and no repayment since. Tyler's face flushed a furious red, his hands curling into fists on his knees. That was temporary, he stammered. It was theft, Martin said flatly, his words like a gavel, and documented. Then, Martin opened another folder, one I hadn't seen him touch. He slid color copies across the desk. Mrs. Cole, he said, using Avery's former married name. Payments to Ethan Cole. Notes, consult, property scout, and this one, Mother's Place prep. My ears rang. Ethan Cole, my softball buddy. The guy who'd helped me move furniture, for God's sake. I stared at the printouts, my stomach dropping into my shoes. Martin kept talking, but I barely heard him. I didn't need his quiet explanations. It was clear. Avery and Ethan had been planning to move in on Lucille's assets once she was settled, whatever twisted code that was for. They'd been lining up the shot before the game even started. Avery reached for the copies, her hand trembling. This is a gross misrepresentation. Martin put a hand down lightly on the desk. Not a threat, just a line. You can take a picture. You can take it to your attorney, but you will not take the originals. Tyler's voice went low, ugly. We're taking you to court. All of this, every single bit, is undue influence. Avery chimed in, her voice rising to a furious pitch. You isolated her. You coerced her. This won't stand. We'll see you in front of a judge. Martin clasped his hands, his eyes on them, a predatory calm in his gaze, like he'd been waiting for this moment. If you file, he said, his voice cutting through their anger, all of it goes public. Every text, every email, every audio recording, every medical letter confirming capacity. He let the words hang in the heavy air. Your call. Just know the cost. Avery's mouth opened, then slowly closed. Tyler just stared at the desk, like it had personally insulted him. Neither spoke. Martin didn't push. He just sat, steady, like a man who had all the time in the world. I felt the blazer on my shoulders. Heavy but steady. For the first time since Lucille's hospital room, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to show up. I was already here. I was ready. 3 days after the will reading, I opened my front door to a man in a windbreaker, holding a thick envelope. My name was scrawled across the front in heavy black ink. He didn't even ask who I was. Just handed it over, muttering, "I'm sorry, man." He looked past me, probably hoping I'd just shut the door and make it easy for both of us. Not your fault, I said, and closed the door. The envelope was warm from the sun. I didn't open it for 10 minutes. I just sat on the couch, it resting on my knees like a hot plate, staring at the corners, stalling for no one but myself. The lawsuit was 20 pages long, and it read like a story I'd never lived. They claimed I had willfully and deliberately isolated Lucille Hartman, coerced her into significant changes in estate planning, and exerted financial pressure for personal gain. That last line would have been hilarious if it didn't have my damn name under it, in bold. My stomach twisted as I skimmed faster. Everything Martin had warned me about. There it was, in legalese, accusations dressed up like facts, evidence twisted into suggestion. Every time I'd picked up a prescription, every doctor's visit, now painted as strategy. Like I'd been working some long con instead of just showing up. Avery started calling that night. Her first voicemail was almost polite, like a negotiation. Dorian, this is all unnecessary. I think if we can both be reasonable, we can resolve this quietly. 12 hours later, another message. Her voice was tighter, clipped. I'm trying to keep this civil, but if you force our hand, you'll regret this. You know you will. Tyler didn't bother with words. Just skull emojis, and the word thief like he was 12. I didn't respond to either of them. I didn't have the bandwidth. I went to work the next morning, tried to focus on invoices and delivery routes, but my head wasn't in it. I missed a turn on the way to a convenience store and backed the truck right into a steel post while unloading crates. Nate, my boss, pulled me aside in the warehouse after I clocked out. Dorian, man, he said, his voice soft but firm. Maybe take the rest of the month. Figure your life out a bit. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't cruel. I shook his hand, promised to stay in touch, and walked out of there with my last paycheck in one hand and nothing else in the other. That weekend, I packed the bare basics. Work boots, clothes, Lucille's letters, the will, the deed, and I drove to Old Saybrook for good. No plan, no announcements, just a quiet move away from the version of myself that kept waiting for people to change. I'd barely unpacked when the Hartford Chronicle ran a piece, Family feud, designer sues son-in-law over will. The photo was of Avery, all smiles in a navy dress. Not me, I didn't even get a bad picture, I got a name in. The headline and a whole lot of strangers' opinions. I read the comments until I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Half of them assumed I was some broke moocher who'd married in for a payday. One guy called me a gold digger with stubble. I stopped reading after that. People love messes they don't have to clean up. But the cottage, it was quiet in the best possible way. No ticking clocks. No one asking if I could run to the store or resend a file. I found Lucille's journals in a canvas bin in the linen closet. Dozens of them. Cheap, spiral-bound notebooks with color-coded stickers. She didn't write poetry or long essays. Just little things. Tuesday light bulb above sink went out. Dorian fixed it. I didn't have to ask twice. Coffee with Rose. She said my hair looked nice. I said it was a wig. We laughed. Dinner. Chicken cutlets. I still miss hearing thank you. Those entries. They knocked something loose in me. The ones that hit the hardest weren't about what she'd lost. They were about what she'd noticed and kept to herself. Tucked between the journals in one of her sketchbooks, I found a diagram. It looked like a puzzle, a drawing of the backyard, with arrows from the old shed to a spot marked studio, another to a square labeled tea table, then tools, then neighbors with nothing to do. Lucille had drawn a place before she ever said it out loud. I started picturing it. Not big or fancy, but a place where older folks, the ones who got overlooked, could come and fix things. Or break them. Or just sit with a cup of weak coffee and be remembered. That night, I stood at the edge of the backyard with a flashlight, looking at the frame she'd started for that raised bed. I thought about everything she'd quietly, without fanfare, put in motion before she died. I decided right then, if I made it through court without losing everything, I'd build it. I'd call it Lucille's Workshop. No slogan, no membership forms. Just a long table, a pot of coffee, and maybe a bulletin board where people could tack up birthdays and photos and names they didn't want to forget. Sometime after midnight, Ethan messaged me. His name lit up my screen like a glaring mistake. "Man, it's not what it looks like," he wrote. No apology, just a pathetic hedge. I didn't respond. Didn't even let the read receipt go through. It looked like betrayal, and that was enough to cover most of it. The next morning, Martin called. His voice was calm as ever. "First hearing's been scheduled," he said. "New London, 2 weeks. Don't be late." "I'll be there," I replied. "You don't have to like this," he added, like he was reading my thoughts. "You just have to show up." I didn't tell him I'd already started sketching out lumber dimensions for a long workbench. Didn't mention I'd printed out a flyer template that just said, "Lucille's Workshop, coffee, talk, projects, all are welcome." I just said, "Yeah, I got it," and hung up. The courthouse in New London felt like a place where bad news was handed out in thick envelopes. The hallway smelled faintly of stale coffee. I wore the blazer, not for show, but because Lucille told me to. Armor isn't just for soldiers. If I had to walk into that courtroom with people who thought I was a thief, I was damn well going to look like someone worth listening to. Courtroom 4B was packed tighter than I expected. Reporters in the back row, scribbling notes like this was some gripping drama, not the brutal tail end of a woman's life being dragged through paperwork. Some familiar faces from Lucille's old church were there too. Judge Alvarez sat high on the bench, silver hair tied back, glasses low on her nose. She had the air of a high school principal who'd sent enough kids home for fighting to spot trouble before it even started. Martin leaned over, his voice low. "Don't react unless I say. Keep your hands on the table, eyes on me." I nodded once, a silent promise. Avery and Tyler sat across the aisle, both dressed like politicians. Dark, polished, rehearsed. Their lawyer, Paula Jin, had a voice that sounded like it charged by the hour. She stood immediately, launching into her attack as if we were all in the wrong room. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is about manipulation, not inheritance. About a vulnerable elder pushed by a man with motive, access, and a distinct lack of oversight." Judge Alvarez raised a single skeptical brow. "You referring to Mr. Hartman?" "Yes, Your Honor, Dorian Hartman. A delivery driver with no legal background, no caregiving credentials, and no familial blood tie to Mrs." She paused, as if savoring the insult. "Lucille Hartman." Martin didn't move a muscle, just let her go. Mr. Hartman inserted himself into Lucille's life in her final year. He was present at her death. He took control of her mail, her access, her finances. This will was revised mere weeks before her passing, cutting out her biological children and granting Mr. Hartman, again, a son-in-law, control of her estate. She paused for dramatic effect. There is a clear pattern of isolation and undue influence. Judge Alvarez didn't flinch. And your proof? Oh, we will demonstrate, Paula Jin declared, through messaging records, absence of prior gifts, and the significant shift in language in Mrs. Hartman's revised will. Then Martin finally stood. He moved like someone with all the time in the world. Not slow, just sure. Your Honor, he began. Let's begin with Lucille Hartman's medical records. This is a report from Dr. Ingrid Shu, dated 6 weeks before Lucille's passing, confirming full capacity and awareness, signed, witnessed, and notarized. He passed it to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. She flipped through it without a word, her expression unreadable. Martin continued, his voice calm, steady. Next, we have audio recordings, all taken with Lucille's consent. She requested they be made in case this very moment arrived. He clicked a button on the small speaker on the desk. Tyler's voice played, loud and clear. I can't come by, Mom. Jets are on. It's a divisional game. Just rest, all right. Then Lucille's voice, barely above a whisper. Okay, honey. Martin let that hang in the silence, a heavy weight, then clicked to the next recording. Avery's voice, sharp. I can't bring you to brunch, Mom. It's not a good look for my clients to see a walker at the table. I'll come by tomorrow, all right? Lucille again, soft, resigned. I understand. It's okay. It wasn't. Martin then laid out the bank records, charts, printed checks, highlighted text. Exhibit C, he stated, is a record of a $22,500 loan to Tyler Hartman, labeled Vendor Float, with an expected 6-month repayment. 15 months later, Mr. Hartman wrote, and I quote, "My bad. No repayment was made." Tyler leaned toward Paula, whispering something hot and fast. She waved him off. Martin kept going, relentless. Exhibit D Venmo screenshots. Payments from Avery Cole, now Hartman, to Ethan Cole. Notes include consult, property scout, and one that reads, Mother's Place Prep. He looked up, his gaze fixing on Avery. This was while Lucille was still alive, still competent, still asking her daughter for rides to chemotherapy. Paula stood, trying to object. These screenshots lack context. Judge Alvarez cut her off, her voice crisp. They seem clear enough. Do you have evidence suggesting otherwise? Paula didn't answer. Martin stepped back to the speaker one more time. Final exhibit. A video recorded in this very office flickered to life on the small screen. Lucille appeared, seated upright, her hair covered in a scarf, face pale but eyes sharp, unwavering. If anyone's watching this, she said, her voice clear and strong, it means I'm gone, and they're trying to undo what I chose. She looked directly into the lens, straight into my eyes, it felt like. Dorian didn't want my money. He wanted me to matter. My children wanted me to disappear when I was inconvenient. So I made choices. If they're angry, they can be angry, but I hope they're also quiet enough to hear the truth. The courtroom went dead silent. No throat clears, no paper rustling. Just that kind of stillness people get when there's nothing left to pretend about. Judge Alvarez sat for a beat, then looked down at her notes. Miss Jin, 2 questions. Paula stood straighter. Yes, Your Honor. Was Lucille Hartman legally declared incompetent at any time? No, Your Honor. Do you have any signed, dated documents stating Mr. Hartman coerced her? No, Your Honor. Then I'll be brief. She looked up, glasses sliding down just slightly. This court finds the will valid. Capacity was sound. No evidence of coercion or undue influence. Mr. Hartman acted within his legal rights. If there were a section in probate law for filial cowardice, I might add it. But there isn't. She banged the gavel once. We're done here. Outside the courtroom, cameras clicked like a swarm of angry locusts. Tyler brushed past me on the sidewalk, hissing, "You snake! You ruined us!" Avery, already by a reporter, said loud enough for the microphones, "He weaponized grief." That's what he did. I didn't even look at either of them. I walked straight to my truck, started the engine, and didn't exhale until I was miles out of downtown. The very next morning, I filed for divorce. Martin had already structured Lucille's inheritance as separate property, clean and untouchable. Avery's lawyer tried to puff out his chest, talking about negotiating terms, But that stopped cold the moment Martin offered to enter the voicemail transcripts as evidence. Ethan, my former softball buddy, sent me a long rambling text about boundaries and mixed signals and the pressure of proximity. I blocked him without answering. I wasn't looking for explanations anymore. Some words just meant what they meant. Betrayal doesn't come with clarifiers. I spent the cold months that followed with a hammer in one hand and Lucille's sketchpad in the other. The cottage stayed quiet, the heat humming low through the baseboards, as I worked out back in the old shed, wearing fingerless gloves, a propane heater buzzing like a jet engine. It wasn't fancy. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I cleared the space, patched the roof, and added shelves made from scrap wood I'd salvaged from the dump pile behind the hardware store. I built one long workbench from old cedar planks, leveling it with coins under the legs, just like Lucille used to do when a table rocked. I mounted a pegboard, hung up hammers, screwdrivers, and even an old level with no bubble in it. I bought a coffee urn at a church rummage sale for $5 and set up a corner with mismatched mugs and a tin of sugar that clumped in the cold. I found 6 folding chairs at Goodwill and scrubbed the rust off their hinges until they stopped squealing. Then with roofing nails, I stuck a handwritten sign at the edge of the road. Lucille's Workshop. Coffee, talk, small projects. No hours, no prices, no promises. That first Saturday, I fully expected to spend it alone. Maybe sand a picture frame or fix the broken handle on the back gate, just to keep my hands busy. But around 9:30, an old red pickup truck pulled up, slow. Out stepped Walt Briggs, 71, a gray beard cascading down to his chest, his hands like twisted rope. "Heard you could use another set of calluses," he grumbled, holding a toolbox older than I was. 20 minutes later, Mabel Esposito knocked, holding a cracked wooden tray and a sleeve of sugar cookies. She told me she'd been a cafeteria lady for 34 years and missed the noise of people. Gene came last. He didn't say much, just nodded once, walked in, and silently claimed a busted stool near the window with a sanding block, like it was already his. We spent 3 hours fixing a wobbly chair someone had left out by the post office. We drank weak coffee and talked about absolutely nothing that made the news. Mabel told a hilarious story about a 4th grader who tried to trade a lunch tray for her car keys. Walt taught me how to splice 2 kinds of rope and joked that a good knot could outlive a bad man. Gene didn't talk much, but he laughed once when Walt tripped over the extension cord, and that, for me, counted for something. When Mabel left, she hugged me tight. "I haven't used my hands all winter," she said, her voice thick with emotion. That stuck with me, harder than I expected. The next Saturday, 5 people came. The one after that, 8. By April, we had 12 regulars. Some brought tools, some brought chairs. Most brought stories and things that needed fixing. Lamps, broken frames, an old jewelry box with a busted hinge. People brought what they had. They also brought seed packets, jars of screws, cookie tins full of mystery hardware, things they couldn't throw away but didn't know what else to do with. I kept a notebook under the coffee pot and jotted down little lines when I remembered to. Gene sanded a board like it insulted him. Walt taught me a better way to tie off twine. Mabel said her joints hurt less when she laughed. The Hartford Chronicle even came back for a follow-up piece. This time the headline was much nicer. "A son-in-law builds a place." His mother-in-law would have loved. I still cringed reading it, but the article wasn't bad. They quoted Walt saying, "It's not therapy, but it works." Mabel claimed, "We had the best coffee on the shoreline," which was a flat-out lie, but she said it with such a warm smile. Calls started coming in from other towns. Groton, Killingworth, even one from Providence, asking how to start something similar. I didn't have a kit or a process. I just said, start with a table, then listen. One Wednesday afternoon, Avery showed up. She pulled into the gravel drive like she was late for a Zoom call. Dress pants, tailored coat, perfect hair, heels that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. I met her halfway down the drive. "I came to make amends," she said. "Amends start with truth," I replied, my voice steady. "Not photo ops." She looked past me toward the workshop. "I just thought maybe I could be part of the story now." I nodded slowly. "You could have been part of the story a long time ago." She shifted her purse, uncomfortable. "That's not fair. I was busy. I had clients." "I was busy too. I said. I showed up anyway. Her smile faltered. You're angry. I'm honest, I corrected. Have you paid Lucille's estate back for anything? Her face stiffened. That seems punitive. Then we're done here, I said. She didn't touch a tool, didn't take off her coat. She just stood there long enough to realize I wasn't going to soften, then turned and walked back to her car, her heels loud on the porch boards as she left. A week later, I got a one-line email from Tyler. Can we be family again? I didn't respond, not out of spite, not to make a point. I wasn't keeping score anymore. I was keeping promises. Around that same time, a woman named Claire knocked on the workshop door during cleanup. She said she was a social worker from Middletown, read about us, and asked if she could volunteer 2 afternoons a week. You know we don't pay, right? I asked. She just smiled. Good. I don't like paperwork anyway. We stuck a Post-it on the wall that said Claire Coordinator and got back to work. The morning of Lucille's memorial, I woke up before the sun, pulled on the same navy blazer she'd left for me, and set up folding chairs across the lawn like we were preparing for a backyard wedding. Claire brought lemonade and a huge tin of oatmeal cookies. Walt showed up with his grandson and a 6-pack of ginger ale. Mabel wore a sun hat decorated with clothespins, claiming it made her feel artsy. John arrived early and, without a word, wiped down every bench with lemon oil before I could even ask. By noon, we had almost 90 people scattered across the yard, front to back. Some brought flowers. Some brought tools. A few just came with a quiet presence. Like they didn't need to say anything. They just needed to be there. I stood at the front of the shed, hands shoved deep in my pockets, watching the crowd settle. A few folks nodded at me expectantly, as if I should say something. I'm not a speech guy, never was. But I cleared my throat and stepped forward anyway. I don't have a fancy story, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I just want to say, Lucille didn't want to be remembered for dying. She wanted to be seen while she was still alive. People shifted in their seats, eyes lifting to mine. I looked out at them, then down at my own rough hands. Seeing people is work, I continued. It's not a sentiment. It's not a like button. It's showing up when it's not convenient. It's remembering how someone takes their coffee. It's asking how they're feeling and listening to the whole answer. Nobody clapped, which was good. I didn't want applause. I wanted the silence that meant they understood. Afterward, a professor from UConn, Dr. Patel, came up to me. He was in khakis and sneakers, holding a notebook. What you're doing here, he said, his eyes bright. It matches everything our research keeps missing. This is what people need. Somewhere they can feel useful, not managed. He asked if I'd speak at a community health conference in the fall. I told him I wasn't much of a speaker. He just smiled. You just proved otherwise. I didn't promise him anything, but I didn't say no either. Toward the end of the afternoon, Walt's grandson tugged at my sleeve and handed me a crayon drawing on construction paper. It showed the workshop, wide and bright, with people sitting at a long table. Across the top, in big crooked letters, it said, Mr. Dorian's House of Fixing. I laughed out loud. You know what? That's better than what I had, I told him. He grinned, like he'd just renamed a planet. Then I saw someone standing at the edge of the crowd. Tyler. He looked thinner than I remembered. Hair longer, shoulders smaller. He held an old metal toolbox like it weighed more than it should have. He didn't say much, just walked up to me. You need help painting that bench? He asked, his voice low. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the toolbox, then at him, and nodded. Yeah, I said, that'd be good. We painted in silence for a long time. I handed him a brush. He didn't ask questions, didn't make jokes. He just worked. After 2 hours, when the bench was dry and the sun had dipped behind the trees, he pulled a folded cashier's check from his jacket and laid it on the table without looking at me. I sold the jet skis, he said. It's not all of it, but it's a start. I didn't say thank you. I didn't shake his hand. I just nodded once and picked up the brush again. That was enough. Avery didn't show up. Later that night, I saw she'd sent me an email offering to curate the workshop's aesthetic and elevate its impact through professional branding. I read it twice and still didn't know what half the words even meant in this context. I closed it without replying. The workshop didn't need branding. It needed chairs that didn't wobble and people who meant what they said. After the last guests left and the cookie tin was half empty, I sat on the back steps with a cup of lukewarm lemonade, watching the dust roll in. The year had started in a hospital room, shrouded in antiseptic and betrayal, and it ended here, on solid ground, in a place built with hands and old wood and promises kept. Claire came out with her jacket on. "Groton's ready," she said. "Community Center asked if we could come by next week. Maybe talk about setting up a workshop there." I smiled, sipping my drink. "We'll bring coffee, extra screws, whatever we've got." When the yard finally went quiet, I walked back inside, took Lucille's charm bracelet off the hook by the door, and touched it once. The way you tap a doorbell without thinking? I don't pray much, but right then, I said thanks. 2 summers later, I sat at a folding table in a church basement in Montville, facing a dozen people holding clipboards and coffee cups, all nodding like I just explained the secret to the universe. I'd given this talk 6 times already, but it still felt weird being called a community founder, like I wore a badge or something. I still felt like the same guy who used to stack kegs at 6 a.m. and thought volunteering meant moving your cousin's couch. "I'm not here to sell you a program," I told them, leaning forward. "You need a space, a table, and someone willing to keep showing up. That's it. Everything else you'll figure out." They asked good questions: insurance, code compliance, liability waivers, and I answered as best I could. Claire usually handled that part, but she'd thrown her back out moving mulch at the Groton site, so I was flying solo. The foundation we built wasn't fancy. It was a Google Doc, a checking account, and a mission. One workshop in every county that wanted one. No fees, no branding. Just sweat, coffee, and someone keeping a notebook so the little victories didn't get swallowed by the bigger world. Dr. Patel helped us with a grant proposal. I kept stopping him every other paragraph to ask, "Can we say that in English?" He'd laugh the first few times. Then he started writing everything like it was meant for someone who'd never been to a conference, which was exactly the point. And Lucille's name. That stayed on the letterhead. Not negotiable. One night in May, I got a call from a Vermont number. I almost didn't answer. But I did. It was Ethan. He said he'd moved north, cleaned up, got out of real estate. I was a mess, he admitted. Still kind of am. He paused. "I know I don't deserve much, but I want to apologize. No strings, no ask. I just wanted to say it." I waited a second, then said, "I believe actions, not speeches." He didn't argue. A week later, the foundation got a $500 donation from a name I knew. No note. I let it sit on the kitchen table for a day, then deposited it and used the money to buy a secondhand planer and a better coffee maker. People noticed the coffee first, then they noticed the planer. Tyler never said sorry, not directly, but he kept showing up. Saturdays mostly. He'd bring donuts, hand out sandpaper, remind folks to double-check their cuts. One time he fixed a drawer for a woman who lived 2 towns over, and she told him, "You've got your mother's smile." He didn't answer, just nodded and wiped his hands on his jeans. That was as close to growth as some men ever get. And it counted. Avery sent a letter. 5 pages, front and back, handwritten. She blamed the market, their upbringing, the expectations of their social circles. It read like a weather report that conveniently forgot to mention the storm she made. I didn't reply. Some doors are better closed and sealed with nails. The day we opened our 4th partner site in New Canaan, a woman in her 80s handed me a photo. Lucille sitting on a folding chair at a church picnic in 2002, holding a styrofoam plate, smiling like someone had just told her a wonderful secret. "She held my hand when my husband died," the woman said, her eyes misty. I never forgot that. I took the photo and taped it to the side of the register. It stayed there. People sometimes ask me what justice looks like. I tell them it's not headlines or judgments or payback. It's this: a place where folks show up and leave better than they arrived. And the ones who tried to make you small? They have to live with the fact that you built anyway. At the end of the day, when I lock up, I touch the charm bracelet hanging by the door and the sleeve of the blazer next to it. And every time I hear Lucille's voice again, "Armor isn't only for soldiers." She was right. I didn't win money. I won my life back. What would you have done in my situation? If your own family had betrayed you like this, would you have fought back or walked away? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.